All right. So I'm so excited to have Miss Kaitlin on today. I just feel like everything that I talk about, like overcoming the societal standards and like the rule book and like all of that, I feel like you have been there, done it, and you are like living in it. So what a perfect guest to have on. I just thank you for being here.
I am so excited. I mean, obviously, you were just on my show and we had the best time ever. So I'm so happy that we get to do this on just like have each other in our lives again 2 weeks after. Like, what a
Yeah.
gift, what a treat. And then thank you. Just thank you for having me
Yeah.
in this seat. This is one of my favorite things to do. And, hopefully, I can pour into your community in some way that someone feels really seen today. Cause I know that, you know, breaking the rules is something me and you love to do.
Right? I know. I feel like I'm getting there. I feel like my voice is coming out finally, and it feels really good. But you're ahead of me in this game, and so it's really really cool being in your energy. Truly, like in person, when I'm like around you and your
Thank
energy,
you.
it's like, dang, it's like, oh, she just lights you up. So yeah, it's so much fun. I want to ask you, the classic question, and we can unpack it as deeply as you want, but. I mean, how did you get here? Like you are now here having your own podcast, you're a coach, you are so many things, you have a workbook, you have so much out now, and now you're on this kind of other side, so to
Yeah.
speak, of everything.
Thank you for this question. And I always feel like it's such a loaded question. And
It's
I
so
think
loaded.
you could go back to probably every podcast I've ever been on and I've given a different answer. So here's the today version. Okay. Here's the
I love
today
it.
version. The exclusive, the most up to date. No, really truly it's been a journey and I don't see that lightly. It's been a hell of a journey. And I would say, like, if I had to pinpoint where this kind of all began, it was about 5 years ago now. I left my then marriage. And at the time, I was 33, I had been married. Let's see, we were coming up on our 5 year wedding anniversary. It's crazy. I'm
Wow.
officially divorced as long as I was married, which feels really
Same.
wild, really wild.
Wow.
Um, my daughter was 3 at the time. And just to give a little backstory, this wasn't a traditional divorce in the sense that number one, I owned the business. Like my main income was this business I owned with my ex, which was the fitness business. So we owned a gym together. And to that community, it was a really large community of members that we had built. And it was all people who lived in our town. And even though people
Oh,
consider me in
wow.
LA. Yeah. At the time, I was in this smaller town of Simi Valley. So it's much
Okay.
smaller than like an LA. Everyone knows each other. Like my friends would come visit me and they're like, "Are you famous?" And I'm like, "No, it's just really small. Everyone knows everyone here."
I
And
love that.
because we were in the community business, like always talking to people, yes, I could not go somewhere that I didn't know someone there. So it was one of those things that everyone pictured us as this like perfect couple. We were happy. We owned a business together. We had a baby. Like we just like put the bow on perfect family.
Yeah.
And it was so not perfect. It was really, really messy. And here's the thing, we've done a lot of healing since then. I would say that's one of the gifts that this past year has brought me is that my ex and I have been able to really come together for the better of our daughter. And I didn't ever think I would see this day, but 5 years ago, we were not here. It was really dark, really messy, and I felt super isolated because I was like, if I tell anybody what's happening, then they're going to judge him. They're going to judge our life. And then what if I stay with him? They're going to judge me even more. What if I like, all of these things? What if I leave and if I stay? And I was just in this turmoil. So anyway, long story short, it's pretty clear. I decided to leave. It's now more open. Back then it was a little bit more, I kept it a little more close to the vest, if you will. But I
Mhm.
met my current spouse, my partner, while I was still married.
Wow.
So and for those of you that don't
Mm.
know, that was a very untraditional relationship in the fact that my partner is non binary. So it's like, okay, she's leaving her marriage, but
Yeah.
also now coming out as queer. What's happening?
So
What
many
in the
things.
world?
Oh my gosh.
So that was really wild. And there was a lot of
Mhm,
backlash that came with that decision because, again,
mhm,
I was married. So it was considered like, were you cheating? Are you having an affair? We only knew each other like
mhm,
3 weeks before I decided to leave my marriage. And I always am like, I didn't leave because of my partner, but my partner certainly shed light on a lot of things that were broken and also showed me what could be.
mhm.
And I took the leap. I took the leap. And it was through that leap because that's the big thing that happened, right? That was the thing that broke. But that's what, inspired me to start the Beam Life, to start podcasting, to start sharing my story, to start connecting with other
Yeah,
women because I was like going through that. I didn't have this and I wanted this. And so now I hope to bring in and attract and find other women who maybe find themselves in these situations that like they can't break free or they feel really stuck or and maybe it's
mhm,
not even a relationship, maybe it's like I want to start my dream business but I am stuck in this 9 to 5 because it's providing my safety. And so yeah, that's kind of a really long answer to your question, but I think necessary context to sort of build on
totally.
what we're going to go for.
I have to ask, I mean, of course, there's so many questions right away,
Yeah.
but, I mean, did you feel like you wanted to leave your marriage earlier than you did, but perhaps were maybe a little bit too scared to, or, what are people gonna think? What's my mom gonna say? Like, all of that. Do you feel like you stayed stuck longer?
Yeah, looking back because that was the other thing to the outside world, it looked like my calling the marriage off and
Mhm.
separating looked sudden. It looked out of nowhere, which
Mm,
is
sure.
why a lot of people blamed it on, oh, well, Caitlin met D, right? Caitlin met this partner and that's why they left.
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever been married, but that's not the way it works. You don't just like peace out if it was
Mm.
like not something that had existed for a long time. I just had kept it quiet. And
Mhm.
so I would say we were in a pretty bad shape for about 2.5 years. Like the first year is always great, right? It's just like one of those things you're like, oh, okay, we're kind of doing this like bliss thing. I think where we really kind of went wrong is we should have always been friends and business partners. We should have never been married.
Mhm.
And so when I left my fashion career and went full time, we started to really clash a lot
Okay.
and butted heads. And it was this very competitive nature. Then we had our daughter, and like the joy came back in because it's like, oh my gosh, we have this beautiful baby. And then as she got older, and like I was feeling like a big loss of identity because I'm like,
Mhm.
wait, nothing changed for you. Like, yeah, you got the label of dad, but you got to go right back to business. You got to go right back to your life. I now know that I had postpartum. I was extremely depressed. I completely felt like my whole identity had been shifted. I didn't know who I was. All I wanted to do was go back to work. But then I felt like it was just it was a hard time. So that really kind of began some of the things. And I started to seek other avenues, like maybe growing my own business and all of those things. And I was told you can't do that and all of these
Mhm.
things. And so, yeah, it really did for about 2 years. It was pretty gnarly and we were in marriage counseling and trying to figure out things and I just was like I come from divorced parents, so I grew up with that and I just kept telling myself like I don't see how this is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So, potentially, if you had left a little bit earlier, I don't know that it would change, where you are today, but I almost wonder if, somebody in the same situation, if she's contemplating it, would you tell her,
Yeah.
"Just get up and go?"
Well, I think it's such a personal decision. That's why it's so interesting. And it's why people don't share where they are at in relationships because
Mhm.
people usually share from their lens. They're like, well, yeah, just do it, or no, stay. And there's no
Yeah.
right or wrong answer. There is no right. I mean,
Mhm.
of course, if you're in danger, yes, we need to
Yeah.
talk about that, get out, right? But in this terms of like just deep unhappiness and dissatisfaction and feeling disconnected, like that's something to consider and to look at. And only you know what can come of it. But what really helped me was I pictured my daughter being 33 and I thought about her saying to me like, hey, mom, I've been in this marriage for 5 years. We've been trying to make it work. I'm super unhappy. And I just don't see how this is going to work. Cause those are all the things that were going on in my head. And I could never look her in the eyes and be like, stay, just stay. I could never tell her that. So I then was like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I have to do this. I need to make this move. And that gave me the courage and I knew the answer the whole time. You find yourself caught in this web, like, but is it going to be better on the other side? And,
Mhm.
am I being too quick? Am I going to screw up my kid? All of these things.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I can't tell you to
So
leave, but I
yeah,
would
yeah.
tell you to explore it?
Like the idea that I'm feeling and like what's coming to mind for me is just the concept of getting unstuck and the concept of whether it's in divorce or not, a marriage. It could just be something like you mentioned, something so simple as just kind of saying yes to something that sounds really exciting to you but just kind of like almost taking that leap and getting unstuck and changing. And fear holds us back so often, where I think that a lot of women don't make the decision that they secretly really want to make because
Yeah,
of that fear.
it's a real thing. It's
Mhm.
super, super real. And my biggest thing is like, okay, it's this or something better. This
Oh,
or something better. Like that's the methodology because if this is not serving me, what is the harm in trying something else? Because the worst is going to be is where I'm at right now,
so good.
and here's not good. So what do I have to lose?
Mm, yeah. Okay, let's talk, about be everything and more, right? Beam. Like, oh my gosh,
Yes,
like
yes, yes,
I
yes.
love it. I love the lightning bolt. Every time I see a lightning bolt, I'm like, it's Kaitlin. Just love it so much. I see clothes or whatever, and I'm like, that. But tell me a little bit about that, like the mission there and what that means.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that reference to the lightning bolt. The amount of people I have DM me and text me, they're like, "Lightning
Yay!
pajamas, lightning slippers, lightning, hat or whatever it is." They're like,
So
"I
fun.
see you everywhere." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I love that that's what you think." Like that was
Yeah.
my goal. Like get lit up, baby, get lit up. So, no, it's funny because it I can't take full credit for the name. I had Be Everything and More. And I remember when I was starting this, that's who I was trying to serve was this woman
Mhm.
where I was at the present time who truly was like, you don't just have to be a mom. You don't just have
Mhm.
to be an entrepreneur. You don't just have to be this amazing employee or a daughter or a sister you can be everything and more. You are allowed to be. And it doesn't have to make you burnt out. It doesn't make you feel stretched
Mhm.
thin. You can be everything and more and
Mhm.
thrive. And that is really when I said that to at the time it was a really good friend of mine, but she was working for me at the time and I said, "I'm thinking Be Everything and More." And she goes, "You realize the acronym for that is BEAM." And I was like, done. Done, done,
So
done,
good.
done. And so I always give her credit. And shout out to Jane who just quickly said that back to me because I didn't see that at
Yeah.
first. I was going to call it Be Everything and More. And so yeah, the Beam Life, once she said that, I was like, genius, done. That's it. That's the name.
Yeah.
And it is because I love that it stands for Be Everything and More, but also beam is like beam of light. Just beam yourself up
Mhm.
and be the beam, be that light for yourself and for others. And that's a mission that I wildly stand for. In my biggest, highest of high visions that I have is like, a woman from Germany, a woman from Japan, a woman from South America, a woman from the States, and they're all together and none of them speak the same language, have never met, but yet they can say beam life and they're like, "Oh, I see you, sis. I see you, sis. I know what you're talking about, right?" Like we're living the beam life. We know what that means. And so it needs no language. It's all about intention. You know what I mean?
I love it. This is so good. It's so fun. And it's like the feeling, like I love it. It's like the feeling of it really encapsulates like how I see you, it's just like, dang, like do it all
Thank you.
and love your life. Like don't, like we're not just trying to do it all and like diving into like the hustle culture and the, being frazzled and living every day kind of with grumpiness or like a dis-ease, right? But we're living just feeling so lit up and happy and excited. And I love it. Like when I'm watching your
Yeah.
Instagram stories, I'm just like, she's on the treadmill and she's smiling. She's doing this and she's like having the best time. She's picking her kid up from school and like it looks so like fun, and you're not sitting there like, oh, it looks perfect on the outside, but I really hate everything. Like
Yeah.
really, truly, like authentically living in that energy.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm always careful when I say like choose happy, choose like this, because
Mm,
listen, shit still gets hard. It gets hard.
yeah,
And this year in particular, I faced some really big things. But when we make the decision to choose our life rather than take the life or accept the life that we feel like has been handed to us, but we actively are choosing, it
yeah,
makes the hard things not feel as hard, if that makes sense. Or it can still feel hard, but you have more hope that it's like, this
yeah.
is temporary. This is a chapter or a page of the story. It is not the story. And so I think that that has really helped to anchor me when things aren't all smiley and perfect and happy, because yeah, I'm just like everyone else. I love to show you the happy, the smiley, and the this and that, I would say, is how life is a good majority of the time. But even when things are hard, which they are, it's like, you know what? We got this. We got this.
I love it so much. Oh, you're gonna hear my dog in the background. She's like super excited, but
I love
it
it.
literally like no. So what I want to ask is like piggybacking off of that and that feeling and the honesty, right? I want to ask you like what you would say to that woman who, you see that woman in her early 30s or maybe her late 20s, and she just feels a little bit lost and is just ready for, that inspiration or just that change, right? The thing is, I think that a lot of women in that situation don't know where to start. They don't know what to do.
Mm,
So what would you tell her? Like how could she get into the beam life, right? How can she get this feeling and change?
yeah. I would say the first step, if you haven't done this, is tell somebody. Just tell somebody. Plug in. Surround yourself. I mean, me and you met through Crystal's community. I have a
Yeah.
similar community, the Beam Life. It's full of women who are not going to tell you that what you're thinking is crazy or that you're too old or that it's impossible. Because if you are surrounding yourself, I'll even say like the dangerous people are some really, when I was going through this process, I had some girlfriends at the time. They didn't mean anything by it, but they were also unhappy in their relationship. So I found ourselves going out to brunch and they'd be like, well, that's just how marriage is. That's how it's supposed to
Mm.
be. So if be around other people who have either gone through the thing that you're going through or having more success than you are, and have those conversations. Once you start getting some clarity, it's easier to start breaking free because you're not as scared. We get scared when we don't know what's on the other side. So talk to someone who's on the other side. Get some information, right? And that's really important to not forget, is that when we are stuck and isolated and only talking to ourselves or other negative people or people who are also scared, like in that instance, I was probably
Yeah.
talking to 3 or 4 girlfriends who are miserable in their marriage. They're scared too. So they're
Yeah.
not exploring other options. So we're all just like sitting in our own shit, basically, negativity. And it's you've got to think outside the box. I would say like that's the first thing, is plug in, get into a community, or even if it's not a community, if that's overwhelming, find one person
Mm,
and just explore. And
yeah.
then I would say, for me, my favorite game, and I share this with my community all the time, is the worst case scenario game.
Ooh.
So I love to write out, like anytime I'm making a scary decision, I think, what is literally the worst thing that could happen? If like the shit hits the fan, everything's falling apart, things are on fire, what does that look like? And would I be
Yeah.
okay? Like, would I actually physically, emotionally be all right? And I would say almost every time that answer is yes, you will be okay. And the likelihood of it actually happening is so small. But again,
So,
we're afraid of the unknown. So at
yeah.
least play out the thing you're scared of. Okay, so what if you do lose everything? What
Yeah.
if you do make the wrong decision? What if you know, do say the wrong thing? Are you going to be okay? Yes, you're going to be okay. But what also is the cost of staying where you are? Play out that
Mhm.
scenario too.
I
So,
love that because
yeah, that's what
you
I would
kinda
say.
mentioned that. Yeah, you kinda mentioned that earlier, where I am now and just taking the leap, like, where might it bring me? And then, yeah, what's the worst case scenario? But where we are now, when we compare that a little bit to just, "What if we took the leap? What happens?" I mean, that is so powerful to think of it that way. I know for
Yeah.
myself, there's been
Yeah.
multiple times where I'm just like, "Oh, no, like, I don't know if I should do that. What if I do it and I don't know what's gonna happen." But where I'm at now doesn't serve me, and I don't like it anymore, and I wanna change anyway,
Yeah.
so, like, why not?
Why not? You know, we could
Love
have
it.
died. I could have said that. That's the one thing I'd say. Why not?
Yeah,
That's my
right?
piece of advice.
I love it. Just ask yourself, "Why not?" But truly, I'm so glad to, like, have you, on and talking about this because you really have been through, I think, what, society would consider some very scary things, some very scary
Yeah.
conversations that have happened as you leave this marriage, and then you come out queer, and you change, and you have so many changes, and it's like, okay, facing that, you could have easily stayed very small, stayed inside, pretended that nothing was wrong, and just been
Yep.
secretly unhappy for years and years to come. But
Yeah.
instead, it's like you're like, what's the worst case scenario? I'm going to face it head on and I'm going to do this. And now, I don't know your whole journey. I haven't known you forever and ever, but I mean, I see you now and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you did the thing.
Yeah. It's life doesn't stop lifing. I mean, even since making all those big decisions, I had a hell of a year in 2023 where I really came head to head with some finances stuff and recognized that I was truly spending far too much and got myself into so much
Mhm.
debt and felt a lot of shame and um, embarrassment around being so careless with, finances. And that was a big thing for me. And then this past year, my daughter was diagnosed with autism, which, you know, it's like not a surprise now that I know everything. I'm like, oh, this all adds up. It makes sense. But that process was challenging because I'm such a mama bear too. So it's like trying to like get and advocate the best you can for your kid, but also there's a lot of emotional expense that goes into that because it's your baby, And so I would say that like that divorce, which was such a fork in the road for me, and while it was probably one of the hardest times in my life, it has literally created this resilience shield for me on it's like a barometer. It's like if you can survive
Mhm.
that, girl, bring it. Bring it. Just kidding,
Mhm.
universe, okay? Yes, you set me up. I always say
You don't have
2023.
to.
Yeah, we don't have to. No, 2023 brought me so much, and truly, I was just like, "Holy crap.
Mhm.
This is a lot, but we can survive this. We can get through this."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's helpful when you do start to make some hard decisions that it can support you in some of the really big ones.
I wanna ask you, as you're going through this time, everything that you've been mentioning, these hard times, all of this, what are you doing to support yourself? Maybe back then you might not have had as many tools in your toolbox or that kind of
Yeah.
thing, but what are you doing even up to now? Like what are those main things?
You know, I wish I had, like, some profound answer for you that was like, "I meditate,
Right? The secret
I
pill.
I journal." No. No,
Mhm.
you will not. I do love to journal, I do love to meditate, but I'll be super honest with you, I am a mom of an 8-year-old, and I do contract work, I run a six-figure business, I am jamming all the time, so I don't necessarily have that, like, perfect ritual. However, the thing I do every single day, without fail, is number one, I wake up every day and I claim like I am her now. And that's a principle that it takes 2 seconds. It's free and you claim it. I am her. I am that woman I want to be. And then I do a mini check-in with myself. I say like, okay, Kaitlin, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like you are burnt out, you're exhausted, and 10 being like life is jamming, we're awesome at riding a high wave. Where are you at today? Like, where are you? Because understanding where you're at tells you what you need. So on days I'm like a 5 or below, I'm like, okay, today priority is rest. It's slowing down. It's unplugging. It's being present. It's maybe calling a friend. On days I'm like 6 and above, I think to myself, okay, I can pour more. I have more energy to give. I can expend more versus needing to receive. And I also think like what is going right in my life today? Like I think about there's always a good thing going on. So I would say like that whole routine takes 3 minutes. I am her now. Where am I at? Like what do I have today? What is my capacity? Where am I at? And then, being able to think what's going right in my world today.
So good. Like, I feel like everyone needs to re-listen to that. I always ask at the end too for like, like that one tangible self-care tip for you to share, but I feel like I don't even need to ask you that question. I feel like this is like something that we can all like implement right now. Really checking in. How
Yeah.
often do we really do that? Check in with ourselves and just like see what's going on. How are we feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, because some days you might want the journal, right? Some days that journal might serve you. Other days you might need the meditation. Some days those things are not going to be what you need. You need to talk to somebody. You need a friend. You need somebody to talk to your business about. You need to brainstorm, right? You're feeling super creative. You need an outlet. Maybe you need to move. So we don't know what that one self-care thing is because it's going to change. We evolve. We do not need the same thing every day. Right?
So
Like, at least I don't. So knowing where you're at helps you know what you need. And then when our needs are being met, we are way more delightful humans.
So true. Okay, tell us, your workbook, where we can find you. I mean, you have a top podcast, like all of the things.
Thanks, girl. So many things. So only confusing thing is you can always find me on Instagram at the Beam Life, but my podcast is called Goal Slayer. Okay. It is not the Beam Life podcast, formerly Beam Life podcast, but Goal Slayer podcast. I am on Instagram at the Beam Life. And that's where you can find all my stuff. But I also have the journal that Audrey's mentioning on Amazon. So it's the Beam Life Journal. So that's all the deets on where we can connect. And truly, like, my favorite thing is to hear from podcast listeners. So if you're listening to this and you've made it all the way to the end here, please check in with Audrey and I and leave her a review because it's like, us podcasters, we need some love too. And Audrey, you do an amazing show. So shout out to the listeners and I hope to hear from you.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on, and I'll make sure everything's linked down below, of course.
Thanks, girl.